Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming out today. My name is Zach Parrish. I'm the programming librarian here at the Bexley Public Library. Before we get started, we're very happy that we have such a wonderful crowd in person today. This is a hybrid event, so we do have people joining online over a live stream. So at the end of Emily's presentation, if we have time for Q&A, if you have a question, just raise your hand and I will come around with a microphone. That way those at home can hear what was asked and they're not left wondering, what was that great question that Emily's talking about? And for those joining online, please type any questions or comments into the chat at any time, and we will do our best to bring them into the room at the end. I also want to mention a couple programs up top really quick. First of all, a big thanks to Judy Oppenheimer and Jason Crable at the Decorative Arts Center of Ohio. This is like, yes, give it up for Judy and Jason. Thank you. This one's kind of like a soft curator event, but there's an excellent exhibit going on at DACO right now, Star Trek and Worlds Beyond, and the exhibition is going on now through August 31st. So if you haven't checked it out, please do yourself a favor and get over there by the end of August. And speaking of that exhibition, in July, on Sunday, July 27th at 3 o'clock, we will have a curator talk going over some of the props and artifacts from Star Trek series that go along with the exhibition at Decorative Arts Center of Ohio. And for anyone interested in the hard science behind Star Trek, we do have an astronomy series coming up in July with the Ohio State University Department of Astronomy. So the first program is Monday, July 27th at 7:30, and we'll have 3 programs in July, all different talks, and then weather permitting, we might be able to do some stargazing. So on with today's featured speaker. We are very thankful and lucky to be joined by Emily Strand, who is the Director of Campus Ministry and Liturgical Music at Ohio Dominican University. She's an author, podcaster, and speaker, as well as an award-winning singer-songwriter and musician. She holds an MA in theology from the University of Dayton and has taught religion at the college level for more than 20 years. Emily has published 2 books on Catholic sacraments and several peer-reviewed chapters and essays on the religious, symbolic, and spiritual themes in popular fiction such as Harry Potter and Star Wars, along with Star Trek. With Dr. Kathryn N. McDaniel of Marietta College, Emily co-hosts Potterversity, a Potter Studies podcast, a show in the MuggleNet family of podcasts. And with McDaniel and Amy H. Sturgis, Emily is the co-editor of 3 scholarly books for academic presses on Star Wars, Star Trek, and Harry Potter. So I will turn it over to Emily Strand. Please give a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Zach, for that wonderful intro. Gotta have a passcode. Okay, let's see if I can do all this at once. Scoot you over. You'd think I'd be ready for this. Okay, so thank you for that. And you just heard all about me, so I can go, oh, and it was working, and now it's not. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe I'll just do that. Hey, look, that worked. I'll just do that. It's fine. So Zach gave a wonderful intro. Thank you so much, Zach. But the things that I will highlight on this slide is that, as you heard, my background is Catholic theology, especially sacramental theology, and liturgy, especially practical liturgy, not necessarily studying it, although I do that, but putting it on, doing it. And so I do that both at Ohio Dominican University and at Immaculate Conception Parish, because I'm a lifelong church musician. I will also highlight that, Vanna White moment, I served on humanities faculty at Mount Carmel College of Nursing here in Columbus after my family moved here from Dayton, actually cultural competence. So that's going to play into what I talk about with you today. And then, but the real reason I'm here is because I am what Henry Jenkins calls an ACA-fan. So I'm an academic who studies what I'm a fan of, and I'm a fan of that thing that I study. And so this is kind of my strange hobby that I do, but it has resulted in these great texts that we worked so hard on. I also wanted to highlight that the talk that I'll share with you today is actually in a forthcoming chapter in a forthcoming volume, also by Vernon Press, edited by my friends Jason Kaufman and Aaron Peterson, two academics, and it's going to focus on how Star Trek inspires leadership, especially educational leadership. And so that is available for pre-order from Vernon Press. You notice these prices here, right? Okay, because these are academic volumes, and they tend to be geared in buyership for academic institutions. So that's part of why that price point is so very high. But we'll say a little something about the books that I have available today back there. Maybe I can give you a discount. We won't say too much more about that online. Notes of thanks. Zach also covered this, but I just wanted to thank my friend Tom Betty, who I thought was going to be here, but maybe he's watching online. Hope you are, Tom. Tom made this possible. I said to Tom, what are all these Star Trek events, and how can I get in on this? And so Tom spoke to Judith and made that happen. So Judith and Jason also, that Dayco exhibit, folks, is just fantastic. I hope that you have a chance to get out to see it. It is really phenomenal, and they just the host of Star Trek events that they have this summer is just such a treat for us who are fans. And finally, I want to thank Zach and the folks here at the Bexley Library for maintaining a forum for free speech here in Columbus, Ohio, and especially in Bexley. That being said, can we talk about DEI for just a second? Okay, so DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Just to be clear, what we're talking about here. I'm going to put up a very brief and incomplete timeline of what has gone on with DEI in the last several years. Summer of 2020, George Floyd is murdered, and all of a sudden there's this groundswell of social pressure on companies and institutions to adopt formal DEI initiatives to address DEI. Many of us stood by watching this thinking, this is long overdue, right? Then in 2023, the Supreme Court overturns affirmative action. Wow. Kind of blindsided by that. Definitely feels like the end of an era. All throughout this time period, there are these shifts in public opinion, and corporate policies are just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And of course, President at the time, former President Trump, was campaigning and partly on an effort to end DEI and to eliminate DEI from the federal government especially. Then, of course, in January 2025, just this year, that is exactly what happens. The federal government bans DEI for its workforce. And in March 2025, Ohio gets in the game with Senate Bill 1, which seeks to remove DEI initiatives from Ohio's public universities. So, these changes, this very whirlwind environment for DEI, is not because there is new research saying that DEI is no good. That's not the reason for these changes. Business analysts and those who do research in this area continue to maintain that diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives can foster employee productivity and loyalty. Okay, I'll go back and just say they can when they're done in a sincere and thoroughgoing professional manner. They can do these things. Okay, so they can foster employee productivity and loyalty. They can encourage innovation and growth. Novel ideas are heard and considered. And they can help us recognize diversity as a key component of human flourishing. Let me say that again. Diversity is a key component of human flourishing. So raise your hand if you personally can name at least one episode of Star Trek in which this character appears. Very good, very good. And I'm not even gonna make you do it. And you know that because you're a Star Trek fan, okay, right? You also know that diversity is a key component of human flourishing because you're a Star Trek fan. Maybe you don't go around saying it, to people, hey, did you know diversity is a key component of human flourishing? You don't go around saying it, but on some level, if you have watched enough Star Trek, that idea is ingrained in you, right? So, toxicity has been detected. Logic dictates a new and creative approach to the problem. So, let me tell you a little bit about my experience teaching world religions and then eventually general cultural competence at Mount Carmel College of Nursing. So previously I had taught at University of Dayton, and in a room of 35 students, I would have every major at Dayton. And it was very difficult to find my angle of interest for a religion class, right? Because the religious studies majors and the English majors wanted one thing and the business majors wanted none of it. And, engineering was like, why am I here? So I found that very difficult. And then I taught for Mount Carmel, and they gave me, 40 girls, 38 girls and 2 boys who were all going to be nurses. So when they said, teach them world religions, I said, okay. So I would teach them the basics of each world religion. I would bring in a guest speaker who could help them flesh out and make a connection with that religion. And then we would go over what you have to know about a person who practices religion in its various forms in a clinical healthcare setting. And I tell you, all this DEI noise, ideological noise surrounding DEI was going on at the time I was teaching at Mount Carmel. And I kept thinking to myself, one of these days, somebody is gonna push back on this. Somebody is gonna walk in this classroom and say, why do I have to take this class? And it never happened. I did have a few of them say to me at the end of the course, I at first was not sure about this course, but after listening to the material for about 15 minutes, they understood exactly why they had to take the course. The students learned best when I gave them demonstrable applications of why learning about other cultures matters to their work as a healthcare professional. C.S. Lewis, okay, speaking of Narnia business, C.S. Lewis, author of the Chronicles of Narnia, claimed in 1956 that fantasy literature has the power, he said, to sneak past the watchful dragons of obligation and doubt that often plague discussions of religion and spirituality. I would also add boredom and bad experiences. He thought that fantasy literature had the power to sneak past all that. Because these things plague discussions of religion and spirituality despite the demonstrable benefits of spiritual involvement. Similarly, the Star Trek franchise offers a disarming entry point to the study, practice, and promotion of DEI and cultural competence, imagining and helping its viewers imagine inclusive communities. I'm going to talk about some specific ways that Star Trek can do this, and I think there are many others, but these are 4 that I want to focus on today. First, Star Trek gives audiences a safe space to explore relevant topics like implicit bias. Secondly, it demonstrates that representation matters. It doesn't just say it, it demonstrates it. Its utopian meritocracy motivates the pursuit of a post-scarcity world. That is a very academic-sounding sentence, but we're going to unpack that as we go through. And finally, it demonstrates the benefits of diversity in workplaces and society. Again, it demonstrates it. It doesn't just say it. It demonstrates it. So, is that enough to be getting on with for today? I think so. Yes? Good? All right. So let us go boldly into our implicit biases. One of the most ingenious aspects of Star Trek is the way that its imaginative setting and narrative premise allow for exploration of societal issues that are often viewed as too delicate for public consumption. Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry saw the still new medium of television as a potent tool to comment on the social injustices all around him in 1960s America. Roddenberry effectively created a TV soapbox through which he and his collaborators could speak to the issues of the day in metaphor and allegory. A classic example of this is the episode Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, in which actors painted half black and half white, but on opposite sides of their bodies, look and act like complete morons, demonstrating the irrationality and unsurvivability of their bigoted hatred for one another. I hope that's not too harsh of an assessment of that episode. It's not my favorite, but I think that's kind of the point for them to look and act like morons, because it makes us say, what do you act like such morons for? Like, who cares what side of your body is? But then it reflects back on us and the preferences that we carry through life and the way that we look at people differently when they look different from us. And it causes us to turn. It's a mirror. It holds itself up to ourselves and forces us to look at ourselves more closely. With greater subtlety, though, another classic episode of Star Trek confronts the delicate topic of implicit bias while slipping past the watchful dragons of guilt, shame, and personal accusation that often accompany efforts to address it in modern workplaces. In Balance of Terror, as the USS Enterprise responds to attacks on several Earth outposts, the bridge crew receives a shocking revelation. That age-old enemy of Earth, the Romulans, suspected of the attacks, appear on screen for the first time, and they are, physically at least, nearly identical to Earth's allies, the Vulcans. A bridge crewman, Lieutenant Stiles, whose relatives fought and died in the last Earth-Romulan conflict, jumps to two conclusions. First, he assumes that the attacks on the outposts, which lie near the neutral zone negotiated at the end of that war, were launched by the Romulans. Second, he assumes Mr. Spock, Enterprise Vulcan science officer, may be a Romulan spy. I mean, they do look alike. Look, I mean, it's like this one could be his dad or something. It's crazy. That's a deep cut. That's a deep cut for you guys. I can answer questions about it later. Captain James T. Kirk responds to Stiles' suggestion about Spock by ordering him to, quote, leave any bigotry in your quarters, he says. There's no room for it on the bridge. Now, this strikes me as very similar to the angle that I took with world religions and other aspects of cultural competence with my students. I never asked them to convert to a different religion. In fact, I used to say to them, when some of them would kind of push back on some of the religion's, qualities or whatever, or when somebody was just getting too excited about a religion, that wasn't theirs, I would say, listen, your religion should be, in your opinion, the best religion. If it's not, get a different religion, right? It's okay that you think your religion is best. I think my religion is best, right? But I'm not asking you to change that opinion. You hold whatever opinion you want about that religion. What I'm asking you to do is keep any bias you have against it out of that hospital room, so that you can do your very best job. That is exactly what Kirk is saying to Stiles. He says, think what you want in your quarters, but when you're here on the bridge, there's no room for your bias. There's no room for your bigotry. Stiles holds to his bigotry, unfortunately, even after Kirk's admonition, and the episode pits his biased suspicions against Spock's logic, his scientific objectivity. And logic prevails, allowing Spock to calmly reason through dangerous situations, as is his way. In the end, Spock risks his own life to save Stiles, and they reconcile. The actual risk to Spock in the situation may have been low. We'll come back to that point. This episode of Star Trek cleverly demonstrates the dual nature of implicit bias. Implicit biases are attitudes that form in our brain based on the limited number of experiences that we have accrued, informing our understanding and actions at an unconscious level. Such attitudes developed to help our brains work efficiently, especially when faced with information that may be incomplete, by relying on associative memory to fill the gaps in our understanding. This is important because there are limits to the amount of information our brains can consciously process at one time, and in this way, they can be considered effective survival skills. In the episode, the gaps in Lieutenant Stiles' brain are being filled by associative memory, that is, by his own family's history with the Romulans. His implicit biases lead him to the following conclusions. Number one, that the Romulans are responsible for the attacks on the outposts. And number two, that Spock, who looks like a Romulan, may be a Romulan spy. It is important to note that Stiles' first assumption turns out to be correct. When implicit biases are formed based on accurate and objectively true information, they can help us move through the world. The problems come when they're not based in fact, because they can lead to false or unfair assumptions, such as Stiles' based on looks assumption about Spock being a Romulan spy, despite overwhelming evidence of Spock's loyalty to the Federation, Starfleet, and Enterprise. This classic episode of Star Trek effectively demonstrates why examining our own biases is important. In Balance of Terror, the Enterprise crew are faced with a tense, complicated, consequential, even existential situation. It certainly makes for good television, but more than that, the juxtaposition of Stiles' biases with Spock's logic and the final outcome of Spock heroically saving Stiles conveys a moral message and allows the viewer the space, if you will, to question whether biases should go unexamined in any consequential situation. Is there room for bigotry on your bridge? The episode asks. This kind of moral commentary and invitation to try on other perspectives were part of Star Trek's inherent design. This is most clearly evidenced in the show's casting, which imagined, even in the mid-1960s, that a workplace which represents great diversity can at the same time represent high levels of competence. This casting had both narrative and real-life effects. Author as well, activist, actor, and author George Takei has noted how exhilarating the prospect of playing Mr. Sulu in Star Trek was for him as a Japanese-American actor at the time, because he says almost every other opportunity, it was either inconsequential or defamatory. His words. Both the Sulu character as well as Lieutenant Uhura, played by Nichelle Nichols, were devised to be broadly representative characters. Takei says Roddenberry chose the surname Sulu rather than a more traditional Asian name that would identify the character's country of origin, because it is the name of a real-life sea whose waters touch many Asian countries. Similarly, Uhura's name came from the Swahili word uhuru, which means freedom, and was the title of a book by Robert Rourke, that Nichols carried with her when she auditioned. Roddenberry adopted an altered version as her character's name, intending for Lieutenant Uhura to represent all of Africa on the bridge. Now, if your spidey sense just went, then we're gonna come back to that. We're gonna talk about that. These characters had a definite offset impact. Takei and Nichols are frequently named by prominent younger people of color, such as actor Paul Sun-Hyung Lee and astronaut Mae Jemison, as having broadened horizons of possibility for their own lives. If you can see it, you can be it. And Star Trek helped them and millions of other fans to see it. Okay, here's this big one that we need to unpack. Star Trek's utopian meritocracy motivates our pursuit of a post-scarcity world. Okay, what's all that mean? Star Trek's multicultural cast, helmed by the all-American Kirk, is an aspect of the show that attracted audiences. Brandon Braga, a Trek producer, says that Star Trek depicted a utopian universe where everyone has a place, and this was part of the show's appeal. Leonard Nimoy, the actor who portrayed Mr. Spock, that icon of logic and objectivity, puts it best when he discusses what gives Trek its longevity. I've got a long-ish quote. I don't usually like to put this many words on a screen, but it's an important quote, so I wanted to really put the whole thing in front of you. He says, "It's a moral society that people are attracted to. It really is a meritocracy. If you do well, you advance. If you are good at what you do, you can have the job. It doesn't matter who you are or what your origins are, your color or race. You could be black on one side and white on the other. None of that matters. We need to get jobs done here, he says. And if we have someone who can do the job, they have the job. Audiences recognize that. There's a rightness about that. There's a correctness, not a political correctness, he said, about a meritocracy where performance is valued, where the reality of the truth is recognized and valued. Now, discourse on the nature and relative benefits of what we call the meritocracy, a societal system in which power is based on ability, has shifted in recent years, such that the quote from Nimoy, who died in 2015, might appear naive. Meritocratic thinking among the populace may even undergird some of the current mistrust for DEI initiatives, causing skeptics to assume such programs encourage the hiring of less qualified or even incompetent individuals. Unaddressed social inequalities continue to create educational and professional exclusion in our society. But meritocratic thinking that encourages us to believe that the best and brightest should always win out imprisons the imagination, writes Daniel Markovits, tempting us to view efforts toward greater diversity and representation in workplaces as attempts to reward people who don't measure up solely on the basis of their racial, gender, or other identity. But this critique is not of the concept of meritocracy. It's a critique of its unequal expression in modern society. It's not the ideal of meritocracy that's the problem, some say, but our own failure to live up to it. Here, Star Trek could be helpful, and Nimoy's description demonstrates how. Star Trek really is, he says, a meritocracy, in that it takes place in a post-scarcity setting. And this aspect of its world building drives the franchise's utopian qualities. And I have to just give a plug to, in the Star Trek volume that I have back here at the table, there's an essay by Martina Gjermundsen-Reistad, who is a young, up-and-coming Norwegian scholar, just a delightful human being. And in that, it's all about the post-scarcity setting. I mean, literally it means Star Trek is set in a world been eliminated. Access to education has become free and abundant for all. I mean, this is what a post-scarcity setting is. And in her chapter, she demonstrates, and not uncritically, how this post-scarcity setting is a really useful scaffold for moral and ethical speculation on wealth, opportunity, and inequality. So, plug for Martina. On the USS Enterprise, everyone measures up. Crew competence is a safe assumption. Any instances of incompetence are dealt with swiftly for everyone's safety. Remember that Voyager episode when Janeway and the crew discover that there are these like 3 crew members who are like just totally, the Good Shepherd, okay, they're just coasting. They're just like totally coasting. One of them's too smart, the other's scared of everything, and the other one is, I don't know, they had all these problems. So Janeway, of course, takes them on a little excursion meant to like be like Janeway's boot camp, and then something horrible happens, and then like it's a real crisis, and they have to learn on the fly, and it's life-changing for everyone. It's fabulous. So this incompetence is dealt with, right, very swiftly. And mid-skilled work is prized. It's essential in Starfleet. The captain, after all, does not fly the ship. This is left to lower-ranking crew members like Mayweather, Paris, Sidney LaForge, whose technical skills are prized. As Nimoy says, if you are good at what you do, you can have the job. Note that he does not say, if you are the best in the quadrant at what you do. Meritocracy critics argue for a rethinking of standards of success, for taking a good enough approach to professional life and society that encourages a shared prosperity. In the animated series Star Trek Lower Decks, the franchise demonstrates this idea through the low-ranking but lovable crew of the not-famous Federation starship USS Cerritos. A recurring theme is the characters' unexpected importance and behind-the-scenes heroics despite their low rank, and in the way the franchise welcomed animated Lower Decks characters into the live-action world of its flagship modern series, Strange New Worlds, the importance of these low-ranking characters, both diegetically in Starfleet and in the real world of the franchise, is amplified. Love that episode. Oh, not ready yet. Every crew member on every deck is valued, protected, and permitted to contribute at their own level of authority and expertise in Star Trek, and this demonstrates an ideal version of the meritocracy, helping viewers imagine a world in which quality education and access to employment have become open and inclusive for all. The messy work of answering the inequities surrounding education and access to skills acquisition in our own day has clearly been done in the world of Star Trek, and the result is a diversity of capable people doing their part, achieving excellence at every level. Star Trek may not instruct us how exactly to accomplish this ideal, but it inspires audiences to keep trying. Finally, Star Trek demonstrates the benefits of diversity in workplaces and societies. Gene Roddenberry's son, Rod Roddenberry, says that his father's creative decisions and Star Trek itself are based on his father's notion of IDIC, infinite diversity in infinite combinations, which signified universal acceptance. This appears to have been an inspirational axiom for Roddenberry, but he also worked IDIC into the diegetic world of Star Trek as a sacred Vulcan principle, one that challenges viewers beyond a surface level, or as Nimoy said, a politically correct notion of what makes for inclusive communities. The term IDIC first appears in the original series episode, Is There in Truth No Beauty?, one that demonstrates the power of diversity in both premise and plot. Okay, so I'm gonna try to explain this very complicated episode to you based on 4 stills. Okay, so in the box is this Medusan ambassador, Kolos. Okay, he's an expert in navigational stuff. With him, he's so ugly. His form is so horrible that you will actually go insane if you look upon him. Okay, so they have to keep him in a box. So his handler and his science is this woman who studies him and studies, she's Dr. Miranda Jones. She goes around with him, and spoiler alert, she's actually in love with him. Okay, and that's why they got the goggles on, so that they don't, Anyway, so then she's really, really beautiful. Everybody likes to comment on that, especially if they're male. They like to comment on that in the episode. Everyone's like, whoa, she's so gorgeous. How can somebody so beautiful go around with somebody so ugly, right? Well, they don't even know she's in love with him. But it turns out, as the episode proceeds, she's been playing it cool, but she is actually blind. And they don't realize it. And so she's a perfect companion for him, because she's blind. She can't ever go crazy by looking on him, right? But of course, somebody does look on him. This guy Larry, his name is really Larry. He looks on Kolos, goes crazy, commandeers the ship, takes them where they don't want to go, and they have to employ Kolos's navigational skills in order to right the ship. Well, it's hard to interface with him because nobody can look on him, and so they employ Spock to mind meld with him so that he can access his navigational abilities and right the ship, save everybody, right? So you have a lot of different abilities, disabilities, if you want to call them that. You have a lot of diversity going on in this episode, and it's all interacting with each other very interestingly. So IDIC in the episode acts as a sort of thematic signpost. Early in the episode, Dr. Jones, the beautiful Miranda Jones, notices Mr. Spock's IDIC badge and wonders if he's wearing it to tout his distinctive Vulcan abilities, which she envies for their usefulness in connecting with the Medusan with whom she is in love. However, by episode's end, she realizes what Vulcans hold as a sacred truth. Diversity makes us all more than we are. Their farewell dialogue helps viewers tie together the thematic threads of this insight-dense episode. As Jones prepares to transport, she says to Spock, "The glory of creation is in its infinite diversity." And Spock responds, "And the ways our differences combine to create meaning and beauty." They then exchange two versions of the Vulcan greeting. "Peace and long life, Spock," she says, and Spock responds, "Live long and prosper." Scholar David Burisma notes this interchange suggests a philosophy of peace, for in embracing our interconnectedness, we find and even embrace peace. Whether it's navigational skills, mind melding, or the ability to love that which seems unlovable, everyone benefits in a society that celebrates a diversity of gifts. Mr. Spock himself, he looks like he's saying, "Who, me?" is an emblem of how combining different things, i.e. Vulcan and human, creates a dynamic result. Over and over, Spock's human side allows him to integrate into the Enterprise crew, while his Vulcan half makes him the perfect candidate to fill in the blank with each episode's dangerous predicament that outpaces human ability. Spock's got it. An example of this was mentioned earlier in Balance of Terror, when Spock enters the forward phaser control room and saves Mr. Implicit Biases Styles from a poisonous gas leak. Besides his sense of bravery, Spock is likely less affected by the coolant leak due to differences in his Vulcan physiology. They are just a little bit sturdier than humans. The very aspect of Spock which Styles fears is the one that saves Styles' life. It's Spock's alienness, his difference from Styles. But such differences are prized and treasured aboard a starship in which important life-saving jobs need doing, and there is a rightness about having the right people to do them, no matter their backgrounds or appearances. Even a disability can be seen as an ability in a society that embraces IDIC, as Dr. Jones' blindness illustrates. According to IDIC, it is not just diversity for its own sake that is prized. It is the way our diversities combine to make us greater indeed than the sum of our parts. As business analysts have shown, diversity is a driver of innovation and a bringer of novel ideas. In this sense, it is like a starship that will take us together into the future. I could just watch that all day. But let's wrap up. Star Trek may have not always gotten it perfect in terms of equity in the workplace. There were early treatments of Star Trek characters by Roddenberry, characters who never made it to the screen, that played into certain racial stereotypes even as the show sought to break others down. And while the stories behind Sulu's and Uhura's names indicate a desire for broad representation, they also point to a certain tokenism that expects one person from a minoritized group to represent entire cultures while operating on the dominant group's terms. And we can't ignore those short skirts for the Starfleet ladies, which may well have been, yes, I have Majel Barrett up here on purpose, right? Which may have been a key and not exactly progressive or egalitarian motivator to the show's creators for depicting women on the bridge of the Enterprise in the first place, right? Let's get some beauty up there, right? Even these shortcomings, get it? Shortcomings? Get it? Okay. Are relatable for most organizations. Few of our hallowed institutions have records to be proud of when it comes to DEI, and there's solidarity in that admission and in the desire to move differently into the future. Even with its mistakes, Star Trek's early portrayals of diversity in the workplace helped to create broader cultural, social, and technological horizons in its viewership. Uhura actor Nichelle Nichols put her finger on how Trek inspires. The genius of Gene Roddenberry, she said, was in taking a message, as did Shakespeare so cleverly, and making it dramatically sound while adhering to the first law of show business, to entertain. That's my best Nichelle Nichols. This highly entertaining, substantive, shared cultural text serves and could further serve as a subtle but powerful influence on how we think and talk about DEI in workplaces today. In both its successes and its failures, Star Trek is poised to be a useful tool for DEI discussions because it is first and foremost entertainment. Star Trek captivates, amuses, and stokes a sense of awe and wonder in our capacity as humans and in the wonders a bright future might hold for us. But it also others our problems. inviting us to let down our defenses on issues like implicit bias by creating a fictional environment of speculation that makes sensitive topics more accessible. In its depiction of a multicultural crew in which all skill levels are valued, it presents a representative meritocracy we can all live up to, rather than only the best and the brightest. If we can do that job well, we'll have a place in Starfleet, period. Finally, in its foundational narrative embrace of the inherent power and beauty in diversity, Star Trek may be poised to cut through today's ideological noise surrounding DEI initiatives. Recognizing Star Trek as an imaginative and unconventional tool for the promotion of diversity, equity, and inclusion could help us chart a course toward genuinely inclusive communities and even drive innovation. We have only to make it so. Thank you very much. Thank you. I know we could look at this also for days, but I'm going to just real quick put my references up here, and it's not to tantalize you. You can certainly, I can certainly give you a full list of my references if you wish, but I just wanted them to just catch a glimpse of the works that informed my chapter here. Yeah. So we have time for questions, comments?
If anyone has any questions, if you don't mind raising your hand, I'll come around with the microphone. I had a quick question. Okay. How do you, you had one slide that highlighted a couple of the newer series. How do you feel, it feels like Star Trek has kind of had a resurgence, even past the couple of movies that came out a little while ago, but with Discovery and Picard, how do you feel the newer series are doing with, I don't know, cutting through some of the, isolationism and giving us a platform to explore these conversations?
Well, they're definitely committed to that vision. They're aware of this foundation of what Gene Roddenberry built, and they're committed to continuing that aspect of the series. Sometimes I worry that it's not subtle enough. And sometimes I worry, and I don't spend a lot of time reading people's opinions online, and I recommend you don't either. But because there are lots and lots, and that's where the noise is. That's mostly where the noise is. And so, but I do hope that they continue to commit to embedding these truths in the narrative and making it, as Nichelle Nichols so brilliantly said, making it entertaining. It has to be first and foremost entertaining, or it won't do anything. People will just turn it off. So if it continues to entertain, so like Discovery, I was into the first couple seasons of that, and then after a while I was kind of like, what is going on here? I love this cat though. I love this cat and the cat's owner. I'm tuning in for that. But yeah, and I think Strange New Worlds is doing a great job with the episodic nature. The episodic nature is really key to doing this because you don't get caught up in these long, involved character and relational arcs that you kind of have to know something about before you tune in. You can just show up. You can just show up and turn on an episode and learn something and get something out of it, and you don't even know you're learning because you're so entertained by it. So I hope that with these new series that they continue to do that. I will tell you, this is a long answer to a short question, but I will tell you, they did a great job with Prodigy. I hope Prodigy can find another home because I have a 14-year-old son, and he was probably about 11 when that first aired. I said, oh, come watch this Star Trek thing. I wasn't sure he would be into it because he's such a Star Wars fan. And he's like, no, Mom, because he's not into Harry Potter because like I'm into Harry Potter, so. Man, he was really taken with Prodigy. And then he watched Voyager. Because of Prodigy, he dove in and has just completed 7 seasons of Voyager. So I think that their tack to try to get all ages to be into this really at times very adult show is a great tack to take. So that's kind of a non-answer, but that's what I got. What else? I've rendered you silent. Oh no.
Well, Emily, thank you so much. This was such a wonderful presentation and such a cool perspective to consider for this
Thank
series.
you.
So
Thanks
thank
so
you
much for
much.
turning out on a hot day.